There's a 5-minute breathing technique that, when practiced every morning for 2 weeks, has been shown in published research to measurably lower cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone responsible for visceral fat, poor sleep, and the wired tired feeling most adults over 60 know too well. The technique costs nothing, requires no equipment, and is supported by over 50 randomized clinical trials documented in peer-reviewed medical literature. I'm going to give you the exact protocol in the next 90 seconds, then explain the biology of why it works. The title of this video says, Cuts Cortisol 60% in 2 weeks. And I need to be honest with you up front. That number is the upper end of what specific workplace studies have documented. The more reliable meta-analysis numbers are closer to 15 to 25% baseline cortisol reduction over 4 to 8 weeks of consistent practice. That is still a significant clinical effect from a free intervention, and you will feel changes in sleep and morning energy well before any blood test would show the numbers. This is Dr. Kenzo Longevity. The protocol is called the 4-7-8 breathing method, developed and popularized by Dr. Andrew Weil based on an ancient yogic technique called pranayama. The specific ratio of 4 seconds inhale, 7 seconds hold, and 8 seconds exhale is what creates the targeted nervous system effect. Here's exactly how to do it. Sit comfortably with your back straight, place the tip of your tongue against the ridge of tissue just behind your upper front teeth, and keep it there throughout the exercise. The tongue position is a small detail from the original yogic teaching. It serves to slightly restrict the airflow during the exhale, which lengthens the activation of the relevant nerve pathways. Exhale completely through your mouth, making a soft whooshing sound. Close your mouth and inhale quietly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 7. Exhale completely through your mouth, making the same whooshing sound for a count of 8. That is 1 complete breath cycle. Repeat the cycle a total of 4 times for 1 full session. The whole practice takes roughly 2 minutes for 4 cycles, or 4 to 5 minutes if you extend to the longer 8-cycle version. Do this once in the morning when you wake up, before coffee, before checking your phone, before anything else. The first hour after waking is when your cortisol is naturally at its highest level of the day, called the cortisol awakening response. Practicing during this window is when the breathing intervention has the strongest effect on resetting the daily cortisol curve. After 2 weeks of daily practice, you can increase to 8 cycles per session if you want to deepen the effect. That is the entire protocol, and the published research supporting its mechanism is what we are going to walk through next. Quick thing before we go further, if this kind of practical breakdown is what you have been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. There's a new video on this channel every day on the next strange thing your body is doing right now. Now to the biology, because understanding why this works is what makes it stick as a habit. Your nervous system has 2 main branches that govern how your body responds to the world around you. The sympathetic branch handles the fight or flight response, the one that floods you with adrenaline and cortisol when you sense danger or stress. The parasympathetic branch handles the rest and digest response, the one that slows your heart, lowers your blood pressure, and calms your stress hormones. The single largest nerve in the parasympathetic branch is called the vagus nerve, and it is one of the most important nerves in your entire body. The word vagus comes from Latin, meaning wandering, because the nerve wanders from your brainstem down through your neck and into nearly every major organ in your torso. The vagus nerve connects your brain to your heart, lungs, gut, and most of your internal organs, carrying signals in both directions across this network. About 80% of the information traveling through the vagus nerve actually goes from your body back up to your brain, which is the opposite of what most people assume. This is why physical practices like breathwork and cold exposure can influence mental states so directly. The body is constantly sending signals to the brain through the vagus nerve. When the vagus nerve is well toned and active, your body recovers from stress faster, sleeps deeper, and produces lower baseline levels of cortisol throughout the day. When the vagus nerve is undertoned, your body stays in a chronic low-grade stress state with elevated cortisol, poor sleep, and slow recovery. With age, vagal tone declines naturally in many adults, particularly those with sedentary lifestyles and chronic stress exposure. The decline is measurable through a metric called heart rate variability, often abbreviated as HRV. Heart rate variability is the variation in time between consecutive heartbeats, and counterintuitively, more variation indicates a healthier nervous system. Higher heart rate variability indicates better vagal tone and better autonomic nervous system balance. Quick mention before we keep going, everything in this video sits inside a broader picture of how aging and stress physiology actually connect. I wrote a book about it called The Longevity Blueprint, an ebook organized into 19 short chapters and a 30-day plan. It is the same evidence first, warm but honest tone you get from this channel. First link in the description. If you are curious, otherwise no pressure, this video stands on its own. The 4-7-8 breathing pattern works specifically because the longer exhale relative to inhale is the strongest known dietary or behavioral activator of vagal tone in adults. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Human Neuroscience and other peer-reviewed venues has documented measurable changes. Multiple randomized controlled trials in adults show increases in heart rate variability and decreases in stress markers after consistent breathing practice. The mechanism involves stretch receptors in the lungs, called pulmonary stretch receptors. When you hold a slow, controlled exhale, these receptors send a powerful signal up the vagus nerve to your brainstem. The brainstem responds by reducing sympathetic output, which means less cortisol, less adrenaline, and a shift from stress mode to recovery mode. This is not meditation, this is mechanical biology happening at the level of nerve firing patterns. The reason this specific 4-7-8 ratio works better than other breathing patterns is the 8-count exhale being twice the 4-count inhale. That 2-to-1 exhale to inhale ratio is what creates the dominant vagal signal, and shorter exhales produce weaker effects in head-to-head comparisons. A meta-analysis published in 2023 in Scientific Reports analyzed 58 separate clinical trials of regulated breathing practices. The analysis found significant decreases in stress markers, cortisol levels, and anxiety measures across the combined data, with small to medium effect sizes that are clinically meaningful. The cortisol pathway specifically is worth understanding in a little more detail. Cortisol is produced by your adrenal glands, two small structures sitting on top of your kidneys, and its release is controlled by a system called the HPA axis. HPA stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, 3 parts of your body that communicate with each other to regulate stress hormones. When your nervous system perceives a threat, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenals, which release cortisol into your bloodstream. That cascade happens within seconds, and it is what makes cortisol the fastest acting stress hormone in your body. The vagus nerve directly modulates the HPA axis, applying a kind of braking force when activated. When you breathe slowly with extended exhales, you are physically pulling the brake on the system that produces cortisol. This is why a free intervention, requiring nothing but your own breath, can have such a measurable hormonal effect on your body. This is the part most people miss when they dismiss breathing exercises as soft science. The intervention is mechanical, the receptors are physical, and the hormonal response is measurable in blood tests. Now to the practical details that determine whether your 2 weeks of practice produces measurable results or just feels like sitting and breathing for 5 minutes a day. The 5 most common mistakes that make this protocol fail to deliver what the research documents. Mistake 1, breathing through the chest instead of the diaphragm. Most adults breathe shallowly into the chest as a default pattern, which actually mildly activates the sympathetic nervous system rather than calming it. True diaphragmatic breathing means the lower abdomen rises on the inhale, not the chest. Place one hand on your belly and one on your chest, and only the belly hand should move significantly when you breathe correctly. Mistake 2, doing the practice late in the day when cortisol is already low. Cortisol follows a natural daily rhythm called the cortisol awakening response, with peak levels in the first hour after waking. That morning peak is when the breathing intervention has the strongest effect on resetting the daily curve. Practicing in the evening can still help with sleep, but the cortisol regulation effect is significantly stronger when done within 30 minutes of waking. Mistake 3, rushing the counts. The numbers 4, 7, and 8 are not approximate. The hold and the long exhale are where the vagal activation actually happens, and shortening either one reduces the effect substantially. Use a clock or a metronome app for the first week if you need to, until the rhythm becomes natural. Mistake 4, inconsistent practice. Quick question before we go deeper. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. Breathing practices appear in nearly every traditional medical system across cultures, but the specific patterns vary regionally based on the medical traditions that developed them. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment, because the next part is the safety section that determines whether this is right for your specific situation. Back to mistake 4, inconsistent practice. Cortisol regulation responds to consistent daily signals, not occasional ones, and skipping 3 or 4 mornings per week reduces the cumulative benefit significantly. Daily practice is the minimum effective dose for visible results within 2 weeks. Mistake 5, expecting immediate dramatic results. The first few days, you may notice subtle shifts in how you respond to morning stress, but the measurable changes in baseline cortisol take repeated practice to consolidate. The body needs the signal to be repeated consistently before it adjusts its baseline autonomic settings. Most people notice changes in sleep quality within the first week, with broader stress regulation effects appearing more clearly by week 2 or 3. There is a useful way to track your own progress without any special equipment. Pay attention to 3 subjective markers: your sleep quality, your morning energy, and how you respond to small daily frustrations. If 2 of those 3 are noticeably improving after 10 days of consistent practice, the protocol is working for your nervous system. If none of them have shifted after 2 weeks, the breathing pattern itself may need adjusting. There may also be other factors like chronic poor sleep or untreated medical conditions that need addressing first. A few additional details that improve the effect for some people. Some practitioners add a small visualization to the practice, imagining tension leaving the body on each exhale, which appears to amplify the parasympathetic activation in some individuals. Others find that practicing in front of a window with morning light exposure adds a separate benefit through circadian rhythm regulation. And if you have trouble counting and breathing at the same time, there are free apps that provide audio cues for the 4-7-8 pattern. These apps can be particularly useful for the first week of practice while you build the timing rhythm into muscle memory. None of these additions are required. The base protocol works on its own. Now to the safety section, because breathing practices are generally safe, but there are specific situations where caution matters. Quick observation, if you have made it this far, you already understand more about your nervous system than 90% of adults. The Longevity Blueprint takes this kind of practical stress physiology and organizes it across 19 chapters in a 30-day plan. First link in the description if you want the broader framework. Now back to safety, because skipping this section is how people make changes that backfire. Anyone with severe cardiopulmonary disease, particularly congestive heart failure or COPD with oxygen dependency, should consult their pulmonologist before adopting any breath hold practice. The 7-count hold can transiently raise intrathoracic pressure in ways that affect blood flow in compromised hearts. Anyone with a history of panic attacks or severe anxiety disorders should approach breathwork cautiously. Some people experience increased anxiety in the early sessions because intentional breath awareness can amplify the sensation of being unable to breathe normally. If this happens, reduce the counts or extend them gradually rather than abandoning the practice entirely. Anyone with uncontrolled high blood pressure should monitor symptoms during the breath hold portion. Most people tolerate the 7-count hold without issue, but if you experience dizziness, lightheadedness, or chest discomfort, stop the practice and discuss it with your doctor before continuing. Pregnant women should avoid extended breath holds beyond a comfortable count, particularly in later pregnancy when the diaphragm has reduced space to move. Modify the protocol to a 4-4-6 pattern rather than 4-7-8 if you want to practice during pregnancy. For everyone else without those conditions, the 4-7-8 breathing protocol is one of the safest interventions in the entire field of stress physiology. The research base supporting it is substantial, the cost is zero, and the time commitment is roughly 5 minutes daily. There is no supplement, no device, and no subscription required. Now to the honest limits, because viral content about breathwork often overpromises in ways that the actual research does not support. The title of this video says 60% cortisol reduction in 2 weeks, and that number is the upper bound of what specific workplace studies have measured. The more conservative meta-analysis estimates show 15 to 25% baseline cortisol reduction over 4 to 8 weeks of consistent practice. That is still a substantial clinical effect from a free intervention, but it is not magic. Breathwork is not a replacement for treating clinical anxiety disorders, sleep apnea, severe depression, or any condition that warrants professional medical care. What breathwork is a low-cost daily signal that activates your existing vagal tone and supports your nervous system regulation over time. Combined with sleep, walking, and reasonable stress management, it can be one component of a broader strategy that makes a measurable difference. One last thing before this video closes. If the way I explained today's topic clicked for you, the Longevity Blueprint expands on the same approach across 19 short chapters. First link in the description. There is something interesting about how universal this is across human cultures. Slow breathing patterns appear in Indian pranayama, Tibetan tummo, Chinese qigong, and Japanese Zen meditation, all developed independently across thousands of years. The biological mechanism is the same in every case, even if the cultural framing varies. That convergence across independent traditions is often a signal that something measurable is happening, and modern vagus nerve research is now describing the mechanism in detail. If this video clicked for you, subscribe. There's a new video on this channel every day on the next strange thing your body is doing right now. Your body is running software that has not been updated in 200,000 years. Tomorrow's video is about something connected to everything we just covered. It works on the same vagus nerve system, but through a completely different daily input you would not expect. And whatever you do next, take what serves you, leave what does not. That is next.